The Guardians say they don't want to block their young core from emerging, and those prospects they're holding out for better have a good chance to break through. We'll discuss the odds of that on today's show.
Tanner Bobby of the Guardians, and you're listening to Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Guardians fans? Clocking in all the everydayers, the insiders here at Locked On Guardians for 30 minutes of Guardians talk as we wind down the month of January and try to get into spring training mode a little bit faster despite what the weather is doing to us up here in Cleveland. I'm Justin Lada, one of your two co-hosts here for Locked On Guardians, the only daily podcast that covers your Cleveland Guardians every single day, from the majors, the minors, the draft, and everything in between. Now part of the Locked On, now part of the number one sports podcast network, thanks to you. I've been hosting the show with my friend and coach, Jeff Ellis, who's off today since October of 2022 or September, whereabouts there. And I'm coming up my 20th year covering the Cleveland Guardians minor league farm system as a prospect writer and editor, if you can believe that. All right, on today's show, we're going to get into a multitude of things. Later on today's show, we're going to get into fixing loopholes and equality in the TV deals and why the Dodgers are getting more benefits in their TV deal than just money. We'll talk a little bit later about Chris Antonetti's quote from the winter warm-up or conversation he had at the dinner down in Akron. Remembering to follow what the Guardians do, not what they say. But we're kicking off today's show talking prospects because it is prospect season right now and why being a top 100 prospect matters. So we've seen prospect lists drop everywhere now from Baseball America. MLB Pipeline has theirs out. Keith Law of The Athletic has done his, and ESPN dropped theirs on Tuesday. I haven't seen Baseball Prospectus's top 100 yet, and I know Fangraphs has to do theirs. But remember, the big three that are considered for the Rookie of the Year prospect pick incentive has to be 2 of 3 from Baseball America, Pipeline, and ESPN. Not that really matters for what we're talking about here or the Guardians, depending on how they manipulate service time, all that kind of thing. But I wanted to look at an article that J.J. Cooper and the Baseball America staff wrote on the significance of being a top 100 prospect and how important that is to be on the Baseball America list. Number one, I'll talk about some of the aggregate rankings here in a second. But if you go back, this is what Baseball America did. Going back to 1990 on their list all the way through 2022. And they found their hit rate is pretty good over there. So that's a place you want to have as many top 100 prospects as you can. Obviously, it's never going to be perfect. Some years don't have as many. Guys graduate, guys get hurt, they fall off. And there's always, guys like Jose Ramirez, Stephen Kwan, Shane Bieber, Tanner Bybee, who are late pop-up guys who don't really ever rank on the top 100. Or if they do, it's late and it's late in the back of it. So this is kind of what Baseball America has done historically. 22 players inducted in the Hall of Fame who are eligible to be ranked. Only 2 of them failed to make the top 100 on Baseball America's list. And some of those guys are, Joe Mauer, Vlad Sr. was number 2, all the way down to guys like, hey, Jim Thome was on their rankings and he was 51st. And David Ortiz was 84th on their list. The thing I want to really highlight, though, is that the WAR production that you're getting out of these guys and how many of them are making it to the majors and their rank in the ability to make an impact. So guys who are ranked in the top 100, about 10% of them, or I should say 10 of them, have been top 10 in Baseball Reference WAR. We look at top 20, that's about 14 of them. Top 50, you've got about 43 of them were ranked in the top 100. Top 100 in Baseball Reference WAR, 81 of them ranked in the top 100 of the list. And then it goes kind of down from there, obviously. Guys who have produced 5 or more WAR, 768 were ranked in the top 10 since 1990. And really, you want to be in the top. The top 20 even has produced a lot. They had 8 top 20 guys produce top 10 in Baseball Reference WAR. They had 14 top 20 guys also do that. And then they also had 29 top 50 guys up there. So the hit rate is incredibly, incredibly good. So that's where you want to be. And going back to all their lists from 1990 to 2022, They ranked about 1,800 players, a little bit shorter than that. 91.2% of their top 100, going back to 1990, has been a major league player. And recently, their number keeps going up. 2010 to 2019, it was 96% reached in Major League Baseball. The last 2 years, or their last 2 years of data here, 2020, 2022 was 95%. So if you're ranked 1 through 10, your chances are pretty high. But even if you're ranked 91 through 100, your chances are 89.7%. If you're ranked 1 through 10, it's 97. So it's less than 10% difference if you make the major leagues from 1 through 10 or 91 through 100. So they're hitting pretty good on their rates here. So let's take a look at the Baseball America ones. I'll give you the averages here. So the highest one the Guardians have on any list is going to be Travis Bazzana, who ranks 22nd at Baseball America, 20th at MLB Pipeline, 23rd ESPN with Kylie McDaniel, and he's 50th on Keith Law's list, because Keith Law is not like Travis Bazzana going back to his college days. So that gives him an average ranking of 28 across the big four there. Chase DeLauter comes in at second at an average of 51 because he's 81st on Keith Law's list, who has become the contrarian. Angel Genao is 67 on Baseball America. He's 61 overall. He's actually 31 on Keith Law's list, so Keith really likes Angel Genao. Ralphy Velazquez reaches 33 at ESPN. That's the highest he gets. 56 on Baseball America. Braylon Dowdy was featured on ESPN and Baseball America at 89 and 71. And Parker Messick comes in at 88 on Baseball America. So Baseball America's got 6 Guardians in their top 100, ranging from 22 to 89. Pretty impressive. So that means Travis Bazzana is about in the elite range, that 1 through 20. 28, I almost want to take out Keith Law's ranking because it's such a big outlier. But players in the top 30 have about a 65 to 70% rate of being everyday major league regulars. So that's not even necessarily star level, but it is major league level regular. So that's, pretty good. I know everyone's going to say for number one pick, they want a star level player. But if we average out Keith Law's, I'm not going to do the math here live, but it goes even higher. Chase DeLauter, his is a little bit lower, 51, obviously very influenced there. But most of his is health rated, right? We don't know. The pitching ones were the most interesting here. Cal Steven only appeared on Kylie McDaniel's list on ESPN. I really like him personally, I will say. We'll talk more about that in the coming days. I know Jeff and I are going to do an aggregate official Locked On Guardians prospect list. We might go 20, 30. I'm not sure how many we'll do, but we will do a consensus list for the first time this year together. We'll have our own, obviously. But Dowdy is in a couple lists. Messick's on a couple of lists. Okie was only in Keith Law's list. So just, very odd stuff. But back half of the top 100 prospects only have about a 34% chance of becoming impact players, but they have a chance to make the majors, as it were, though. So the idea is the more top 100 prospects you have, there obviously is no guarantee, but the more you have, the likelihood of those guys making the major leagues and working out is that much higher. And that's what you want, right? If you have more bites at the apple with these guys, especially with Baseball America's hit rate, that's the important thing. Those are the guys you want to have in that. So you look at the averages, like we can go back historically too, and look at that. But the idea here is having more players in the top 100. They're not all going to make it. They're not all going to be impact players, but there's a good chance most of them are going to make it. But you really want that increase. That's why you want the math here. So if you have, let's say, 5 players, if you have 2 players in the top 50 and 5 in the top 100, 50 to 100 range, the probability based on Baseball America's hit rate and their data is that 3 of 7 of those guys might be solid regulars. They have a really good chance. So out of the 7, you take that, you might have about 2 expected regulars, and your hit rate drops. If you only have 2 or 3 in the top 100, your hit rate kind of drops to 1 player. By having 7, you effectively triple your expected value. So if you look at the 80% rule that JJ Cooper confirmed, it's 79.4% of players who make the top 100 at least play 1 major league game. That's important right there. So you get an increase every time you have more players in the top 100 because you diversify the risk. There's a much more a deep list here. So top 100 prospects, they matter in terms of your overall hit rate potentially. There is some significance to them being in the top 100 when it comes to trade assets, health of the farm system, that kind of stuff. There's no guarantees, but it's not a bad thing. And that's kind of why you're seeing, the Guardians do what they're doing right now. And that has to do with Bazzana. It has to do with Chase DeLauter. Less to do with guys like Genao, Ralphy, and Braylon Dowdy, because those guys aren't going to be playing in the majors this year. But that is why there is significance in being a top 100 prospect, even though opinions vary. And remember, internally, these prospects are ranked very differently too. They're going to have a little bit of difference, but I know Baseball America does source those with the teams and some scouts, and they try to get some varying opinions, which is really important. All right. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the past rankings so we can kind of compare notes and look at those. But I know everybody is talking about the quote from Chris Antonetti at the Rubber Ducks Hot Stove Dinner earlier this month. But once again, we are missing a key point about that quote, and we are going to touch on what that is in just a minute. We're going to be talking a little bit about payroll and money on today's show. Let's get real for a second about managing finance. That's overwhelming, right? Between subscriptions, bills that keep going up everywhere, I know that, and trying to figure out where all your money goes each month, easy to feel like we're losing control. And who has time to track down every transaction or hunt down hidden fees, right? That is where you need a place like Rocket Money to come in. It's a personal finance app that helps you take control. It finds and cancels unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and it helps you lower bills so you can grow your savings. If you have financial goals, maybe you spent a lot of money during Christmas, maybe you've got some home improvement projects this year, you want to put money away for someone's college, you want to make a big purchase, go on a vacation, all those things are possible with Rocket Money because you can track all of where your transactions are going. If you have double subscriptions, anything else you might be paying for that you're not aware of, that we all lose track of. Let Rocket Money help you reach those financial goals faster. Join rocketmoney.com/lockdown. That's rocketmoney.com/lockdown, rocketmoney.com/lockdown. As always, thank you for making Locked On Guardians your first listen today and wherever you get podcasts. Again, shout out to all the everydayers for being with us as we are still in off-season mode and trying to transition into spring training here very soon. And shout out to all the insiders too. You go back on Monday, we talked a little bit about the difference of those. So if you are living with the Guardians day in, day out, even in the off-season, you can take that up a level, go ad-free. You can join the Everydayer Club, get Locked On Guardians with no interruptions, and a members-only Discord that you'll have access to, not just Locked On Guardians, all of the Locked On MLB shows, and even more. So you can join the Discord of your favorite team because Locked On has a show for every single team you're a fan of, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. You can go to lockedonguardians.supercast.com. Check the link in the show notes to learn more. And if you're an insider, you get one-on-one texting with us. It's a different subscription, or you get news sent directly to your phone. We ask our insiders mailbag questions. We do monthly chats and all that kind of stuff too. So those are two different things you can do to interact with the show. But remember, Locked On Guardians is always, always free, no matter where you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube or any audio platform. All right, so let's go back real quick and look at some of the top 100 prospects from the last couple of years for the Guardians. So we had Bazzana, DeLauter, Genao, Velazquez, Dowdy, and Messick this year. So that's 6 in Baseball Americas, right? That's pretty good. Last year it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they moved up 1 this year. Last year Jason Churio was on the list. He is out of it this year, but everybody else is in there. Messick is added. Dowdy's added. 2 years ago, they ended with DeLauter, Churio, Ralphie, and Genao, so very similar lists. In 2023, they had Rocchio, Manzardo, Espino was still in this list. DeLauter and Britos, that was 5. So Cleveland still is having some of their best numbers this year in terms of top 100 prospects by Baseball America. I went back to 2016, the last 10 years, right, to find how many top prospects they've had. The close second find is 5, and that goes back to 2016, where we had Bradley Zimmer, Clint Frazier, Brady Aiken, Justice Sheffield, and Bobby Bradley. Obviously, historically, you're going to look at that and you're going to say, well, that doesn't make me feel good about having 6 on the list because those 5 did absolutely nothing in the majors. And that's true. All of them played in the majors except for Brady Aiken. Bradley Zimmer had a very decent career, if underwhelming. Clint Frazier obviously got them Andrew Miller. Justice Sheffield contributed to that trade as well. Bobby Bradley had a short major league career, obviously disappointing too. That's the back half. They didn't have it in the 20s those years. Francisco Mejia was in the top 20s at one point between 17 and 18. I never liked that profile personally, but it hasn't really worked out for him. But he has made the majors. 18 and 19, they only had 2 players in the top 100, and even 2020. And those 3 were Nolan Jones, Tyler Freeman, Francisco Mejia. And then 2021, they got back to 4 with McKenzie, Jones, Jimenez, and Freeman, even though Jimenez wouldn't qualify under these. And then, they've had a lot of position player prospects. People would say this is mostly a pitching team. Honestly, if you go back and look at the last 10 years, most of the guys in the top 100 for them have been position players. Freeman, Rocchio, Arias, Valera, Manzardo, DeLauter, Frazier, Zimmer, Mejia, Jones. Those are all the only pitchers that have been on this list have been McKenzie, Espino, and then this year you have Messick and Doughty. That's been it. Most of the guys have been hitters, believe it or not. All right, let's move on to some of the prospects that we talked about. So everybody by now, I think, has seen or heard or read the Chris Antonetti quote from the Rubber Ducks hot stove dinner that happened in Akron early this month. And the quote was, if you haven't seen it for full, the primary thing we were focused on going into the offseason was adding depth to our relief pitching. On the position player side, it's more complicated. We spent a lot of time debating external acquisitions. In the end, we made the determination that we have an exciting group of young players that are starting to emerge, and we want to give them a chance to contribute. And I know I've seen a lot of people get, very upset about that. And I understand that. Like, that's a quote you're going to say, well, they're not going to add any external bats. And I want to point out again, and I'm not excusing not adding anybody because I'm going to get into that here in a second, but remember to pay attention to what they do and not what they say. We've said that. I know other places. I know TJ and Zach say it all the time too, over at the Selvius Godcast. You have to pay attention to what they do and not what they say. Chris Antonetti is not going to get in a room full of fans and reporters and say, yeah, we want to add this offseason, this bat. The only thing that has really been confirmed this offseason was Stephen Vogt saying at the winter meetings they plan to tackle bullpen needs because they needed bullpen help, and they went out and they did that. So they said that, and then they did it. And the quote that goes back to the end of the season we keep referencing was from Mike Chernoff with reporters at the end of the postseason saying, we know we have to improve our offense. We know we have to improve the outfield. Those are areas we know we need to improve. He didn't go as far to say how they were going to do that. They didn't paint themselves into a corner by saying, yeah, we're going to add externally. They gave themselves some wiggle room. And I know, again, that doesn't excuse anything. But remember this, there was no smoke on the Jose Ramirez extension that came this week, right? We didn't know anything about that. Maybe some people knew it was in the works, but it wasn't public. There was no smoke on Andres Gimenez in a trade for that last year. There was speculation about trading Josh Naylor because the situation made sense, but there was no weeks of buildup to it saying, when is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And then reporting on, well, the Guardians are talking to these teams and these teams are inquiring about Josh Naylor. No, none of those rumors ever got out. There was no there was no actual rumor connecting anybody into the Josh Naylor trades. That stayed very quiet. And supposedly the Guardians wanted to bring back Lane Thomas. And they've talked to, supposedly, there's considerations of guys like Austin Hayes, Miguel Andújar, supposedly do not want to platoon. And that's what's holding them back from signing with a team like Cleveland or somebody else. But the market is slowing as we get closer at the end of free agency and spring training. So guys like Hayes and Andújar may have to settle for platoon roles to get a job. Lane Thomas obviously signed with the Royals early on about that. I don't think Andújar is a good fit personally. I know people are going to want to ask about Harrison Bader. We'll talk about that in a second. And then there's Austin Hayes we can get into a little bit too. Talk more about those fits, why it's difficult, why they might have to accept platoon roles if the Guardians really should go after them, and who they would block. Also later on, I want to get into more of the money stuff because I know people want to talk about payroll. We love talking about payroll. I know. But if you want them to spend more money, yes, they should spend more as is. I'm not giving anybody a pass for that. But league-wide spending trends would change, not just the Guardians, not just with a payroll floor and a payroll cap, but fixing the TV deal disparity. I'm going to dive into some numbers on why the Dodgers TV deal is really more unfair than just how big it is in just a minute. We are approaching the end of the offseason, thankfully, despite what the weather tells us here in Cleveland. Spring training will be here before you know it. The Guardians announced the pitchers and catchers report on February 9th, position players on the 12th, workouts on the 14th, and the first game is the 21st. So we are less than a month away from spring training actual baseball. So if you need more baseball talk to get you through from now till then, and now to opening day when it probably will snow on April 3rd, if we're being honest, check us out on all platforms. Make sure you're auto downloading daily on all your audio platforms so you never miss an episode of Locked On Guardians. If you are really a diehard fan, which, if you're listening to this podcast and you're 20 minutes in, we know you are. You love the Guardians, love talking about them as much as we do. And hit the bell on YouTube so you get notified of when we post any video, an episode, a reaction video to any kind of news. We'll do some top prospect videos as well coming up, all that kind of stuff. All right, let's dive back into those free agents a little bit, and let's get into the Dodgers TV deal. Some things you didn't know, some things I didn't know until I did the research on this. So let's talk about Harrison Bader for a second, because obviously he's off the board. Goes to San Francisco for 2 years, $20 million. Was never really interested personally in Harrison Bader. There was no connection publicly as far as I could see, which isn't a surprise, because if the Guardians actually do want to do a move, whether it's a trade or a free agent, again, they're generally not publicly connected. So who knows? But Harrison Bader had a 122 WRC plus a year ago. That was his best year since 2021, where he's been under 100 every year. 2021, he had a 108 WRC plus with a 306 batting average on balls in play. Now, batting average on balls in play is normally 290 to 320, and there are outliers for guys who run really well and guys who hit the ball really hard. Bader does not hit the ball really hard. He is fast. 84 WRC plus in 2022 with a 300 BABIP. 69 WRC plus in 23, 261 BABIP. 85 WRC plus in 2024 with a 276 BABIP. 2025, a 122 WRC plus with a 359 BABIP. So his career norm for batting average on balls in play has been 307. Okay. So it was, 305. So he was almost 60 points higher on his batting average on balls in play last year. You're not getting all that from speed. You are not gaining 60 points BABIP in a year from speed. So Harrison Bader, and what he did against lefties last year was a 689 OPS. So he didn't hit lefties well last year. He had a 106 for WRC plus for his career. So career-wise, he's hit lefties pretty well. He's a great defender. Defense has been a great metric for him throughout his career. But exit velocity was poor. Hard hit rate was poor. Barrel rate was okay. There's nothing in that profile to suggest what he did last year is sustainable. I think Jeff's talked about it. I've talked about it. Miguel Andújar, last year, what he did, didn't strike out, didn't whiff. That's a good thing. Chases a ton. He has a great arm in the outfield. That's great. 20th percentile in exit velocity, 15th percentile in barrel rate, 18% hard hit rate, and a 348 BABIP. So again, 348 BABIP, way above career norm of 308. So we're talking 40 points of BABIP. And Miguel Andújar doesn't hit the ball hard. He's not particularly fast. So a lot of that was an outlier. Now he has crushed lefties in his career. It's a 121 WRC plus against lefties in his career, but last year it was a 443 BABIP against lefties. So it's also a very questionable fit. And he's only really ever played in left field. He's a poor outfielder in left field as it is. That's not going to happen because Kwan's playing left. I don't see him as a fit right. So Miguel Andújar, to me, doesn't make sense. Austin Hayes, very similar. Fits a little better. Most of his outfield time has been left field. He's got more innings in right field than Andújar. But another guy who, again, the best thing he does really is not, he doesn't hit the ball hard. He just barrels a little bit, and that's about it. Everything else is pretty rough. And he has issues against breaking stuff. It's a fastball. Breaking stuff doesn't go his way. Again, it's an imperfect fit. Maybe imperfect. Maybe waiting for the perfect fit doesn't make sense for this team. Maybe they just need to add something that makes sense. And the reason I say that is Because if you're talking about you don't want to block your young guys from emerging and being a part of the core, I get that with Chase DeLauter. But we can't be saying, well, we want to give Nolan Jones a chance. We can't be saying we want to make sure we give Martinez and Valera a chance. Those guys aren't serious options. Martinez has proven that he is a utility bench type guy at this point. He's got speed. There's a little bit of defense. There's an arm. He hits lefties decently well. There's not enough there for an everyday role. George Valera, I want him to get the chance, but I want him to earn it. I can't just say, okay, George Valera, the guy who's always hurt, you're going to be in competition for an everyday job or a platoon job against right-handers. Same with Chase DeLauter. Daniel Steeman's also a utility backup. He can't be a guy you're giving 400 at-bats to. You just can't. It's not going to help this team. He'd be better off as a guy who gets 200 at-bats on the fringes. And Chase DeLauter is the only guy they shouldn't be blocking, but none of the guys I talked about, Martinez, Valera, Jones, Steeman, none of those guys are guys you want to plug in for full-time at-bats because Chase DeLauter can't give you 100 games because he's never done that. He's played exactly 60 games one time in his career between college and the Cape. His pro high is 57. I can't have Chase DeLauter possibly playing 90 games, which would be his career high ever, and then saying, well, he got hurt, so we're going to turn to Nolan Jones. We're going to turn to Daniel Steeman. We're going to turn to Angel Martinez or George Valera. Can't have that. I don't think that's a recipe that's going to go very well for them. It worked enough last year when they kept bouncing. It didn't really work, but they did it enough to get in the playoffs late. Noel, Rodriguez, Steeman, Valera play a little bit of right field. Again, you want those guys to earn it. Nobody gets blocked if they earn it. I don't know what, Andújar or Hayes is going to cost to play in right field, but it's probably more than Nolan Jones, and they don't want a platoon. But again, they're running out of options, so they're not a perfect fit. And like I said, maybe you don't need a perfect fit. Maybe we shouldn't be looking for a perfect fit, but Bader wasn't it, and none of those guys are a perfect fit. But I don't know. I just can't have those options in the outfield because you don't have anything behind him. Like if Valera and DeLauter get hurt, as they always do, who's coming up behind them? Jonathan Rodriguez? Can't do that either. Petey Halpin? Stuart Fairchild? Can't do any of that. Can't. All right, let's wrap today up with looking at some of the Dodgers TV situation. Let me tell you why the gap here is so big and so ridiculous that it has to be fixed. Forget a cap, forget a floor, the CBT, all that stuff. The TV deal is the most important thing. That was driving money for years. The RSN deals was what was driving money for years in baseball. And that stopped, except for the Dodgers, the Mets, because they have Steve Cohen. All right, let's go back history a little bit. 2011, Bud Selig rejected a $3 billion local TV deal between the Dodgers and Fox Sports because Frank McCourt was going into bankruptcy and was going to go into the court to get bids on selling the team. The TV rights for the Dodgers was expiring back in 2011, and the bidders knew in advance that they knew how much the league would take out of that. They would benefit from the sale of those rights. So in the settlement with the courts, Major League Baseball, Frank McCourt avoided the risk of a judge imposing a deal that was less favorable to the league. MLB agreed to a fair market value of the Dodgers TV deal that would be based on the Fox deal that Selig rejected. So when he sold the team, the value of the TV deal was going to be based on $3 billion, billion locally. And the league back then was taking a 34% cut of the TV deal. But they agreed that it would be 3 billion. The TV rights were bought by Time Warner after McCourt sold the team for $8.35 billion. But Major League Baseball was taking 34% from $3 billion from that TV deal that was originally proposed because they thought it would increase the value of the sale, which it did, because Major League Baseball was taking a 34% cut from $3 billion instead of $8 billion. And then an MLB attorney in 2012 said that the court warned the court that the settlement they agreed on about how much the league would take a cut from could result in a league of, and this is a quote, the Dodgers and 29 other teams. The Dodgers are keeping tens of millions of dollars a year that would otherwise be shared with the league. 34% from $8 billion versus $3 billion, $5 billion difference. So C-League was going to change it, but because of the bankruptcy, the court was in charge, not the league, didn't have the power to change it. So that valuation stayed the same. And then if you look at the TV deal they have now, the deal was about $130 million for the first year instead of $84 million. Now the league is taking 48% of the dollars, right? They're taking 48% of TV contracts right now. So the Dodgers are still getting 34% from that instead of 48. They're still locked into that deal. So the Dodgers TV deal annually comes out to about $334 million. The deal started lower when it was signed, and it's been increasing every year. By the time the Dodgers TV deal ends in 2038, they'll be getting $500 million more a year. The MLB national TV deals end in 2028, and Rob Manfred wants to get traditional networks and streaming services the chance to bid on national, but all of the broadcasts. So all the teams, wherever they lived, no blackouts, which, that's number one to improving the TV situation, right? Because he thinks that's the key to gold. And then you share that with the teams. So the league takes 48% of all of the TV deal, and they redistribute it for the teams. But they're only taking 34% from the Dodgers deal at a lower number. So the deal Rob Manfred wants to do is requiring teams to turn over local broadcast rights to the league. The Dodgers have the biggest TV deal in the league. Are the Dodgers going to give up all of that money that they are keeping on their TV deal without getting something significant in return? Probably not. The CBA is probably going to be 29 or 28 teams versus the Dodgers and Mets. The Dodgers don't want anything to change. Their TV deal is growing. The Brewers, the Guardians, the Rangers, everybody else is getting kicked out of their TV deals, and the Dodgers TV deal is going up because they have a deal with, I think it's Comcast or whoever owns Spectrum, whoever owns that now. Their money keeps going up because it's a conglomerate. They have TV, phone, and everything else. They're not going out of business anytime soon, but the RSN metals have died. They are gone. The bubble's popped. And the Dodgers have been keeping extra money every year under their TV deal going back to 2011. That's what's got to be fixed first. Forget a cap, forget a floor. Rob Manfred needs to fix the TV situation to even the score a little bit. Then we can talk about what things look like with a cap or how teams should spend money or regulating revenue sharing money, which should be spent on players. There needs to be an audit for that if there's not already. But the TV deal has to be fixed. The Dodgers cannot have a 100% corner market on the TV deal while everybody else is losing theirs. That's not good for the sport. It's great for the Dodgers, but it's not good for the sport overall. All right. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Guardians today. Appreciate all of you. Fun hanging out, fun talking Guardians baseball, talking prospects, talking about, off-season moves that haven't happened and whether or not Chris Antonetti is going to telegraph them to us or not. And then talking about a little bit about the TV situation that I found absolutely ridiculous. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you're subscribing and downloading so you get all the latest episodes. Jeff will be talking Guardians baseball with you on Friday. I know he's going to do some historical deep dives on the draft. He might even look ahead to the 2026 draft because college baseball starts in 2 weeks. And next week, we're back to 5 days a week to get ready for spring training. Believe it or not, February is coming fast. If you ever miss an episode of Locked On Guardians, the Everyday Club is for you. Get Locked On Guardians ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to LockedOnGuardians.supercast to join the club, talk Guardians baseball with other fans, with us, and any other things going on in baseball or any of your favorite sports. In the meantime, stay warm, stay safe, check on your neighbors, be good to each other, and go Guardians, go.